let's see. Go. Hello, hello. You guys, I'm late. I'm late to my own webinar. I'm sorry. I just finished Murph. Can everybody hear me? Yeah?
I can.
Amazing. It's okay to show your faces. It makes this nice if I can see you. So feel free to turn the video on. Hey guys. So thanks for joining me. This will be short and sweet. I'm just trying to, oh, somebody just came in as well. Admit. Anybody do Murph today? Yeah, or this past weekend? Yeah. I literally just finished. I'm really sorry we're starting a couple of minutes late, but I think that's about everybody. I'll move this a little bit out of the way. So I'm Kimmy. I think I've met most of you maybe online, but I wanted to just kind of like have a discussion. And I know it's, you know, Memorial Day, and you probably have plans, or maybe you've like done a big workout. But I just really think it's important. You know, I'm passionate about spreading these breath and exposure practices and opening up a conversation about like why, you know. So it's kind of like, hey, we know the benefits of if we were to do weightlifting, or let's say yoga, or a specific like, you know, practice, right? And we know, you know, for those of you who just kind of like show of hands, how many of you maybe do like ice baths regularly, or sauna, or any kind of like thermal exposure?
Cold showers.
Cool. Or anybody do like breath work regularly? Maybe that. Okay. Yeah, cool. So there's this component of doing it to feel better, which is why we do it, right? But there's a very subtle difference, but it's also important, between are you using these practices, and this is kind of universal, but I'm speaking about this in terms of breath and also exposure. Of are you doing this to numb yourself, or are you using this as a practice to improve all other avenues of your life? And so just so you guys kind of know my background, you know, I was a teacher prior to moving out to California. I'm originally from the East Coast, from Virginia. Any East Coasters over there? Yeah, awesome. And it's really important to me that, like, you know, for those of you who are familiar with Deuce Gym, maybe like show of hands, that's where I train out of. Cool. If not, no worries. But we have something at Deuce where we talk about coaching and what does good coaching entail. And at the heart of that is a technical understanding. So obviously we could go down some very significant rabbit holes about what type of breathing and what does that elicit, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we know that breath work is beneficial. Not really looking to go specifically into, let's say, superventilation and what's beneficial about that, or, you know, lengthening your exhales, what's good about that. I want to make sure that for all of you here who I think are interested in breath work, not just in your own life, but also sharing with your communities, it's like, how are we conveying and spreading this message? And if it's just for the gram, or it's just to associate with the practice, then we're kind of missing the point there. And so what do I mean by that? First of all, there's nothing wrong with taking a photo of yourself doing breath work and sharing that. I hope you do that. Amazing. Cool. If you're doing something cool and you want to share with other people, amazing. That being said, it's something that it doesn't just happen one day, right? It happens over time. And what does a breathwork practice look like? It looks more than attending a Wim Hof seminar and being like, hey guys, I went to Wim Hof seminar, which amazing, cool. And so I think what I'm trying to kind of like stir up here is like, let's have not just me talking about it, but let's have a candid conversation about, you know, the connotation that kind of comes up to you when you hear breath work. And I guess for this group particularly, or, you know, I should say in particular, it looks like most of you here are doing breath work. Maybe not everybody has access to the ice and the heat. So we can kind of channel this into why we're doing breath work here, right? And so I just basically want to open it up to you guys now, and feel free to, I don't think, some people are muted, but unmute, not a big deal at all. If we could kind of go around and share, like, how did you get into breath work? And what does your practice look like? Or if you don't have a practice, that's okay as well. But just curious, like, what was it that drew you into it? And then from there, I have a couple other questions, but if that sounds cool with you guys, I'll just kind of call you out in order. Yeah? Okay. So J-Lo, let's start with you, all the way in New Zealand. Hello from the past.
Yes. Oh, so nice to see you.
So nice to see you. So yeah, how did you find out about breath work? And do you have like a consistent routine? Like, what is breath work like? Why do you do it, basically?
Okay. I can't even remember how I got into it really. But my friend Krista from Reebok 09 that you know,
Yes.
she told me about this workshop that she went to. It was a Wim Hof one, run by this guy in Tauranga, a beach over about an hour and a half away. And so that was breath work, and we did an ice bath. And I was just interested because I just wanted to explore, I don't know, something different.
Totally.
You know, for my mind and emotionally as well. And so once I did that workshop, it sort of connected all the dots with my meditation and, you know, the training, the physical training that I do. So, yeah, I just was in love with learning all this information about, you know, how it can actually help me. And, you
And
know,
it was it sounded like it was like a physical practice to help put you into that place of meditation. You know, it's kind of like a vehicle to like step into that, you know.
yeah.
Very cool. Janelle, we'll go to you next. So yeah, how did you find out about breath work? What do you know, what's your practice look like?
So I guess my background is I was a dancer, and I've been doing that since I was quite little. So as I got older in my discipline, I had learned a lot about connecting breath to my movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once I learned how to connect my breath to my movement, it changed everything about my dancing. And then at some point in the middle of all that, I got introduced to Pilates, which is also one of the number one fundamentals is breath, which just makes sense. So I've been doing I guess I'm going to say, though, a certain type of breathing. I
Yeah.
feel it's kind of been one-dimensional, maybe. And I know that there's more to it than I have right now in my toolbox, and I would like to be able to explore what more that looks like, so I can utilize that with my clients.
Totally.
Because nobody breathes, and so that's it in a nutshell, basically.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things where I think everybody can relate. It's like we all breathe, you know. You're going to tell me how to breathe? Like, I already know. But that there are like variations of it, you know, and just like with movement, it's really cool to hear you say, you know, once you paired it with movement, it was a game changer. And same thing even with like, you know, general like strength and conditioning, like GPP with CrossFit, you know, breathing on the rower and pairing it with movement, not just nasal, you know, but like when on the stroke. So totally hear you. Let's go to, I'm just trying to go in order kind of on my screen here. Brian, yeah, you're up.
Hi, how's it
Hi.
going? My introduction into breath work was started off as more of like a focus on just breath. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, just generalized anxiety. And as part of that, obviously, like when you're having an attack or something like that, then breathing has like never been so important. And so I've just tried to focus on the importance of using breathing to bring myself down off the ledge when I was having panic attacks and stuff like that. Around that same time, I also started CrossFit, and which was super beneficial. And it's funny when you start CrossFit, you get into these high intensity metcons and stuff like that. The high heart rate and heavy breathing, it has a very similar connection to when you're having a panic attack. So I was actually having panic attacks while doing metcons because the trigger was the same. And eventually I was able to get over that. But fast forward to now, I'm now a CrossFit coach and a co-owner in a gym in South Texas. And so now exploring more breath work. I'm halfway through your class, Kimmy, and I would love to eventually, take this knowledge to my athletes who also like me are big mouth breathers.
Yeah.
And help them improve their performance.
Totally. And it can totally be done. And again, you guys, like, thanks for all being here. Because I feel like, a big part of, but a big part of getting everyone together is, hey, we're all looking to, not just like impact our life, but, loved ones, like family members, kids, community, and how are we going about doing that? And I think there's an opportunity to kind of carve a space for a new, more accessible kind of language as we share breathwork. That's not, like I like to say in my course, that's somewhere in between this like super scientific, like rigid, more so like suited for academia terms. And then there's also this like very spiritual and, not to discredit this side as well, that, sometimes it's called like for hippies, and it's like, there's an in between, just like teaching the air squat, or like teaching how to do a front squat, teaching how to do a correct push-up, Pilates movements. Like, we can unpack this stuff in a simpler way, but also without it being at either of those extremes. And then that being said, get people to understand that no matter what the practice is, that these things are foundational, that we're building in order to develop like autonomy for our athletes and clients. We don't want them to have to rely on us for all these cues. So it's like, are we guiding them in a way that like helps them self-soothe or, like troubleshoot on their own versus, oh, just get in the ice, or like, oh, just do the super ventilation and like, you'll feel amazing. Like, no, that's like the avoidant strategy. That's the Band-Aid strategy. And not to say that you can't use that as a tool from time to time. But that's, I get excited about all these things. Okay, so we've got a couple more. Bethany, let's have you go next.
Hi.
Hi.
I really resonated with Brian's story. Same thing, I just came across breathwork through CrossFit and ran into Wim Hof and then Brian McKenzie. So I use Shift State, the app. And
Cool.
usually just that was my exposure to it. And then just continuing to use it when I want to shift my state.
Totally. And did they cancel? I mean, that app is still accessible, but did they cancel it, or they stopped adding new content, or it's still?
I'm not sure. I have it through Android, and there was like an issue for some time with it that way. So,
okay.
But yeah,
Cool.
The principle. What I love what you talk about principles, because it's even if I'm not using it daily, app, I understand concepts of how to use it.
Awesome. Stacy, who I don't want to brag, but she does breath and exposure 202 programming, which is 5 times a week, like breath for performance. And I always say it's not just for performance, it's for health as well. But Stacy's like with Kenny, the 2 most committed athletes to that program. So yeah, hey, talk to us, Stacy.
Okay, well, I'm only midway through the damn Murph, so boo for me not getting up earlier and doing it.
You're okay.
So now I got to finish that. But I got into the breath thing kind of, I guess, accidentally. I've always been a like multi-sport athlete. Then I got injured many, many times over. And then I started doing a lot of yoga, a lot of Pilates. and then there's a lot of breathing there, and just kind of accidentally doing that kind of breathing. Then I guess researching like XPT, I found you guys doing your breathing stuff, popped into one of your seminars, and then I was like, okay, this I love, and I'm going to XPT, and then now I just can't do enough of any of it. And I work in South Central, and I'm a homicide detective, and I think there's so many like linkages to the stress stuff and the athlete stuff and the life stuff and preventing getting sick and all these different things that I'm trying to like build it more in my life, and then figure out when I do retire how to make all those links because of everything that everybody's talking about. Like everybody's an athlete, but there's all this major stress, major trauma, and it's all like connected. So I'm trying to learn more, do more, and then, you know, make it all work.
Yeah, like change your community. It's going to be super rad. Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's go Tyler, and then Kenny. We'll save you for last. So, hello.
Hi, I'm so sorry that I kept running out. My son is potty training and actually just had his first successful poop on the potty. So
Wow.
pretty stoked. And I'm saying who I am and why I'm interested. Is that correct?
Yeah, just how you found out about breath work and what your like regular practice looks like now.
Yeah, so I'm Tyler Fleming. I'm a teacher in Detroit. Taught phys ed and health at the high school level, and now I'm elementary. But I found it through Deuce. I guess I'm friends with a few folks there, and it just, as Kimmy was building the space, even just from afar, I was like, man, that looks so cool. And then and as a teacher, I've tried to bring more breathing into like my students, like into teaching for a couple of years. And especially with this, like I'm teaching everything from home and like all this weird stuff right now. So I signed up for Kimmy's course, and some of it just makes so sense and so easy. And I was teaching some of it to like some of my kids' parents through a Zoom call and things like that. And that's great success, sir.
Good job, buddy.
And so I'm on a regular basis. I try and do some sort of breathing every day. I'm trying to teach this guy about breathing as well, just like to calm himself down when he's upset and things like that. But like at the high school level, I would try and calm kids down, like pre or post fights or whatever, and just with little ones, because I teach kindergarten all the way through 5th. So if you learn these skills now, how can that positively impact your life down the road? So
totally.
And
very cool.
Every morning I try and get something in. So.
Awesome. And Kenny, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, so as far as like my practice goes, just whatever you're prescribing on a Monday through Friday basis is more or less what I'm trying to accomplish. I haven't done it yet today because I did the Murph Dealio earlier.
It's okay.
And I'm taking some time in between, like you said.
Yes.
But yeah, as far as like breathing goes, I mean, I did the CrossFit thing for a long time. I got into Ashtanga yoga more recently, and that's kind of when I kind of put the connection between patterning your breath with your movements, and with Ashtanga it's all nasal breathing anyway, so that came pretty naturally to me. Mm-hmm. But I'm a teacher also, and I'm a surfer, and I like the idea of being able to use breath to regulate myself in potentially more critical situations, whether it's in the water or in a classroom with a bunch of little third grade nerds. But yeah, so that's kind of why I'm here. And I'm just so thirsty for this knowledge. And when I saw you, I'm like, oh yeah, any kind of info that I can get, I'm happy to jump on in here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for sharing that. Yeah, it's really important to me that like you guys get to input as well, so that we can all kind of better understand like where we're at and what we're looking to do with it. And what I like about all of this is that everybody's looking to share what they learn, and that's awesome. And so it's like, where do we go from here, right? And so the first thing that I would just kind of encourage everybody to start playing around with is that, you know, introducing, or even not introducing, but starting to layer in more breath work to what you're already teaching or coaching. Like, it doesn't need to be this dramatic thing. Like, all right, guys, so we're going to start doing 5 minutes of breath work at the beginning of every class. You know, like, there's this one thing that I learned from Gabby Reese, who is one of the founders with her husband, Laird Hamilton of XPT, is there's this nonchalant nature that really benefits all of us to share when we're sharing these practices. So specifically, what's one example of that? People get in an ice bath, okay? And what is kind of custom for maybe the CrossFit vibe, or at least it was for a long time, was like, you're doing a workout and your coach is going to be encouraging you, but kind of in this like military style, like, let's go, like, don't give up, come on, you got one more rep. And there's incredible positive intent there, right? Like, I am encouraging you and I'm trying to like psych you up, okay? But like, let's zoom out from that for a second. And that is an external stimulus on an athlete that is useful and a tool. But again, we don't want the athlete or the student to have to rely on that. You know, think of like little kids playing youth sports. Are they looking in the, you know, in the stands or like on the side of the field, like, oh, is mom watching or is dad watching? And, you know, nothing wrong with, my mom came to all my soccer games growing up, or the majority of them. But we want to develop this autonomy. And so when it comes to breath work, right, how can you kind of corral your people and just be like, all right, guys, before we start today, we're doing take 5. So the reason we're doing that is, hey, we want to prime your system. It's important that we're not going into sympathetic mode prior to when we need to. And such a big discussion that I have when it comes to, you know, why breath work, whether it's specifically for like, hey, I want to better control anxiety, which, spoiler, you should share with everyone, like, we all experience this to a certain level. And so like, let's let the cat out of the bag, you know, stepping into that conversation, because by leading with that of like, hey, I experienced this, they almost get permission to be like, oh my gosh, I experienced that too, you know. And it's kind of like walking into the conversation in a more personal way, but also speaking back to this nonchalant nature, right? You'll see people get in the ice bath and Gabby's just kind of like, okay, breathe through your nose. Come on, breathe through your nose. And it's very like, it's very simple. And, you know, I was fortunate to live with them for 9 months. Long story short, they took me in like family when I moved out here. And that's something that's really important to me as I share these practices, is like, there's nothing more beautiful, I think, than when you have a group of people pulled together doing practices to improve their lives. And so it's not just for health, but also this like community, the social component, which I know we're all kind of like navigating right now when, you know, we're doing a virtual classroom, but like, it works. This is the best connection that we can do right now. And so I bring that up because, you know, it's almost like, why are we doing what we do? Is it to feel better and bring people together and develop this support with healthy practices like breathing? Or is it to be associated with what we perceive as healthy practices? And I think a lot of people, like, let me unpack that. If you're like, whoa, Kimmy, like, that was a little too outer space. Think of everybody doing Murph today. Okay. And if you're not in the CrossFit space, you know, Janelle, I don't know if there's like a Pilates workout on Memorial Day, probably not. But this idea of like, I'm going to suffer today and I'm going to let the world know. And okay, you can do that. But like, also there's something beautiful about this quiet composure of like, you do that because that's what you genuinely want to do. And you're paying your respects to these individuals. And okay, you can share your story or whatever, but what is it really about? Is it about being seen in a certain light, or is it doing the healthy practices And as an after effect, you know, as a bonus, is that you're captured in a certain light. And so I want breath work to be the same thing. You know, like whether anyone's watching or not, you're improving your health by practicing breath work. And so with your students, like I said, it could be as simple as the beginning of class, you start the conversation with, and I'm just checking time here. You start the conversation with, all right, guys, so in your nervous system, which basically controls all the functions, has an effect on all the functions of your body. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze, okay? You're on. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. And here's the deal. With a lot of the breathing patterns that we do to down regulate, so feel more relaxed, extending your exhale, even a hiss out, okay? Or breathing in through your nose, ocean breath, right? There's all these different things we can play around with to help someone calm down. Keep in mind that the goal isn't to have us all like feeling airy-fairy and like, oh gosh, kumbaya, peace, amazing, like cool in moments. I want you to feel that way. I do. But we're specifically coming into these states in order to better prepare ourselves and recover from these difficult efforts so that we can go again when we need to be sympathetic. Because unless you're living a life in the mountains by yourself, right? This sympathetic state is very useful and we need to live there. We get in trouble when we're spending too much time there. And so being in this sympathetic state doesn't have to look like you're fighting a lion or a bear out in the wild. It could be you're feeling like pressure about, you know, a conversation or a business meeting that you have, or you've just done a workout and you're like, I'm so exhausted, like, oh my gosh, you know, you're just feeling ill. Okay, cool. Now can we leverage this parasympathetic to help us recover and then be prepared for the next sympathetic? So again, this is a long way of saying like communicating to your people in layman's terms that both sides are relevant. Just like when it comes to health for performance, like it's not one or the other, it's both. How do you get better at weightlifting? It's not by thinking about being better at weightlifting, right? You've got to have not just more weight on the bar, but like a greater control in that range of motion. Okay. You got to make sure that your movement patterns are healthy. You're not just checking the box, but you're actually performing it well. And to develop this virtuosity takes a long time. Same thing with breath work. So I've talked a ton by now, but I hope I'm like painting a little bit more of a picture and a story here of to choose anything to share with your clients or your community or practice for yourself, like is amazing, and just own it. Like it doesn't have to be everything. Think of the young coach that stands in front of a class and is like, all right, guys, today we're doing the back squat, and it's really important that your hands are holding the barbell here, and that, okay, knees out, and your feet should be here, and your knees should be doing this thing, and your chest should be doing, and then you're like, 5 minutes later, nobody's moving. So it's like, pick one thing. Hey, today we're focusing on nasal breathing. Guys, when you're doing nasal breathing in your take 5, breathing in through your nose, out through your nose, I want you to try to relax your neck. So you can almost have them like look into a mirror or their phone, and it's like, hey, when you're breathing in, can you feel it begin to fill in your lower abdomen? And you're just like, oh, okay, we have a muscle in here. That's your diaphragm. Are you feeling from the bottom up? What does that feel like? Keeping it very simple, okay? Other days, right, if you're going into more of a performance aspect, the intervals might be nasal only, and you're trying to encourage them as intensity goes up, as volume goes up, as they're starting to fatigue. Can you drive up the force in your breathing? So, okay. I've had Kenny and Stacy in the 202 programming. We've done a couple different weeks, variations of like every 2 minutes or every 4 minutes, you're going to do these super ventilation breaths. Okay. So you're pulling in a lot more oxygen. You're driving out a lot more CO2 in one inhale or one exhale just by affecting the force, right? There's all these things we can play around with. Just goes to show you that there isn't like a one size fits all, you know, like there's no like genie at the end of this breathwork enlightenment where you're like, oh, that's, you know, like, oh, that's it. No. And so I just encourage everyone to, you know, like I said, start somewhere. If you've taken my course, like amazing. I put that out there because I'm like, people need to know this and in a simple way. And I'll be sharing a performance breathing course soon of like, hey, if you want to use this with your athletes, or if you want to understand the methodology, you know, on your own more, like there's that. But like any craft, like this is a deep body of work. Like it's not, hey, we did nasal breathing one day, like, oh, I'm cured. No, it's like, okay, next time someone's feeling stressed that you know, you can say, hey, I want you to try just 3 breaths right now. And breathe in through your nose. And when you exhale, I want you to hiss out. And for as long as possible. And after 3 breaths, they're like, what? I feel more relaxed. You're like, yeah. So this is why nasal breathing increases parasympathetic tone. A lengthened exhale increases parasympathetic tone. Hissing out, the vibrations, there's something in there that like taps into your vagus nerve, right? All calming. And if someone, you know, needs to be more alert, whether it's before a workout or a class, or just like needs a recharge mid-workout, it's like, okay, let's breathe more forceful. I mean, you guys can try right now, take 3 breaths, super forceful in through your nose, and then super forceful out your mouth. Just 3. You know, and don't be bashful, like send it. You know, and then you're like, oh, I did that with oxygen. Because at the end of the day, this is what makes breathwork so valuable. You know, you don't need anything external. You don't need like a shot of espresso. You don't need a sleeping pill. You just kind of need to play with breath, and knowing that everybody has their preferences as well, you know. And the last thing I'll say, and then I want to open it up for a couple questions if you guys have any, is like, for some people, box breathing, so breathing in, holding, exhaling, holding, very calming. Okay. For other people, what's more calming is just a 1 to 2 tempo. So let's say breathe in for 4, exhale for 8. And so as you're sharing this stuff and practicing this stuff on your own and also with your students, it's opening up that conversation of like, again, it's not a one size fits all, but are you tuning in with what feels best for you? And you can start that subjective. So it's kind of like a little bit of a paradigm shift here, that all of us, you know, we're speaking, and even as I'm giving examples, it's kind of specific to training or working out. But breath work is really working in. And when we're pairing it with movement, there's an initial period where things have to slow down. Intensity's got to lower. And then your body slowly will be able to improve intensity, or I should say increase intensity, increase endurance for all of these things. But it takes a little bit of time. So it's just like opening up a conversation where you go, hey guys, I know we're all feeling a little bit anxious right now. I am too. Here's a way to breathe that can help with that. You know, you're also speaking to people around you of like, hey, I know it's hard to train with, you know, Pilates movement or CrossFit movement or running or walking or all these things, or even, you know, people in your workplace, Stacy, that are just so accustomed to like breathing in through their mouth. It's like, I know it feels a little uncomfortable at first, but you will improve if you just stay patient with it and do a little bit every day, you know? Cool. I could talk for days. I love this. So we got about 5 minutes. Again, I don't want to take too much time from anyone today, but does anybody have any questions? Don't be shy if you do. Cool.
Not sure.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you for jumping in today. I hope this was useful for you in some way. If not, it was nice to just connect with other faces. And please stay in touch. You know, I consider what I've done so far with breathing as just kind of the start. My background in school is in communication, and by no means am I an expert, but it's really important to me that breath work and exposure work is shared in a way that's like accessible and, you know, and simple to people. And it takes a lot of work to like distill it in that way, but I'm signed up for that. And so I look forward to, you know, seeing where we can all kind of grow from here. Yeah. All right. Last call for any questions. We're good?
Thanks, Kimmy.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. And I hope to do more of these. So stay tuned. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Kimmy.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.